The 10,000-seat Sobeys Stadium had been a sea of red, blue and yellow for 5 straight days. Philippine flags draped from every railing. The chants of "Let's go Alex" had echoed through Toronto like thunder. But the moment Belinda Bencic delivered the final crushing blow, something happened that no one expected. The fans who had packed every seat began to vanish. The roar turned to silence, and the WTA was left wondering, had Eala-mania just ended as abruptly as the match itself? For 5 straight days, Alex Eala had turned Sobeys Stadium into something the tennis world had never seen. A celebration of Filipino pride, a home away from home. The chants had been deafening. The flags had been everywhere. Even the food vendors had added chicken adobo to the menu to honor her presence. But on Monday, August 10, 2026, the party came to an abrupt and stunning end. Belinda Bencic, the 2015 Canadian Open champion and Olympic gold medalist, walked onto center court and delivered a performance that silenced the crowd in ways no one could have predicted. The Swiss star, who had been a professional since Eala was just 6 years old, dismantled the Filipina sensation with clinical precision. The first set was competitive. Eala managed to keep up, even leveling the set at 4-4. The crowd roared with every point she won, believing that their hero could pull off another miracle. But then Bencic shifted into another gear. She broke Eala's serve, held her own, and closed out the set 6-4. The 10,000 fans who had packed the stadium, who had waved Philippine flags from every section, who had chanted her name until their voices hoarse, suddenly grew quieter. They had seen Eala come back before. They had seen her survive ankle injuries and fatigue. They believed she could do it again, but the second set was a nightmare. Bencic, playing like a well-oiled machine, broke Eala's serve 3 times and did not drop a single game. 6-0 was a humiliation that no one in the stadium had expected. In just 1 hour and 13 minutes, the dream was over. The final 6-4, 6-7 consecutive wins gone in the blink of an eye. The crowd sat in stunned silence. The Filipina sensation, who had extended her career best winning streak to matches just days earlier, was out. Her run in Toronto was over. And the 10,000 fans who had packed Sobeys Stadium began to empty the stands. What had been a sea of red, blue, and yellow just moments before was suddenly a scattering of empty seats. As Eala left the court, the Filipino fans in Toronto serenaded her with cheers as she waved and blew kisses to the crowd. But the roar had become a whisper. And the WTA was left wondering, had Eala-mania just ended as abruptly as the match itself? The truth was, Alex Eala had been running on fumes long before she stepped onto center court against Belinda Bencic, and the evidence was visible from the very first point. The 21-year-old had just completed the most grueling stretch of her young career. She had won her first WTA Tour title in Washington, D.C. just a week earlier, defeating world No. 3 Jessica Pegula in a rain-delayed final that pushed her to the limit. She had flown to Toronto, barely had time to rest, and immediately faced a brutal draw. Against Alicia Parks, she had to battle back from a second-set loss to win 6-1, 4-6, 6-2. Against Katie McNally, she fought through a nagging right ankle injury and a 2-hour and 39-minute war to win 6-3, 5-7, 6-4. She had twisted her ankle in the second set of that match, called for a medical timeout, had it taped, and then ripped the tape off when it bothered her movement. "I am as tired as one can be at this stage," Eala had admitted before the Bencic match. The exhaustion was visible from the very first game. Against McNally, Eala had already shown signs of fatigue, struggling to move freely after the ankle scare. Against Bencic, those struggles became impossible to hide. The numbers told the story. Eala had played 8 matches in roughly 12 days, winning 7 in hugely impressive fashion. But that kind of workload, combined with the emotional toll of her Washington triumph, had finally caught up with her. Against Bencic, Eala struggled defensively and had difficulty getting her first serve going. Her movement was less sharp and her shots were less precise than they'd been in recent performances. The Swiss star, a player who had been a professional since Eala was just 6 years old, pounced on the opportunity. Bencic raced to a double-break lead over Eala in the second set, dictating the pace with blazing shots from the baseline. Eala had no answers, and after a D.C. Open run in which she seemed capable of overcoming any deficit, her magic Sunday, the bagel 6-0 was a humiliation that no one in the stadium had expected. In just 1 hour and 13 minutes, 7 consecutive wins had evaporated into thin air. After the match, Eala didn't make excuses. She was honest about her condition. "It's always tough, of course, after a loss, but like I said, I'm looking back at these past maybe 2 weeks as a really big positive," she said. "I think I've played really well. I've gotten through so many obstacles. Of course, right now, there's that initial kind of just a little tired and down from the match." She also confirmed that she was healthy, something she was super grateful for. I'm counting my blessings. I'm taking the lessons that I've had from these 2 weeks and hopefully implementing them even more in a better way in Cincinnati and New York, she added. The exhaustion was real, the disappointment was palpable, but the perspective was unmistakably that of a champion who knew her journey was far from over. The final point had been played. Belinda Bencic had just sealed a dominant 6-4, 6-0 victory in just 73 minutes. The stadium, which had been a deafening sea of red, blue, and yellow just moments before, began to empty. Philippine flags that had waved with such passion were now being folded and packed away. The chants that had echoed through Sobeys Stadium like thunder had faded to a whisper, but empty stands at Sobeys Stadium weren't a sign of disappointment. They were a testament to something far more powerful. The fans who had packed the stadium for 5 straight days hadn't just come to watch a tennis match. They had come to witness history. They had come to celebrate a movement, and when that movement came to an end, they didn't stay to mourn. They left with a sense of gratitude that would echo far beyond the Canadian Open. Tournament director Carl Hale had already witnessed the unprecedented impact of what he called Eala-mania. The 21-year-old Filipina had sold out a 10,000-seat stadium in just 30 minutes, a feat only Serena Williams had achieved in the last 20 years. The demand was so overwhelming that organizers were forced to move her match from the 2,800-seat grandstand to center court. Even the food vendors had added chicken adobo to the menu in her honor, a first in tournament history. But the empty stands after Eala's loss told a different story. The fans who had arrived hours early, who had camped outside the stadium to secure a spot, who had worn custom Eala-mania shirts and carried signs that screamed Mahal Kita, had come for one reason and one reason only: to support Alex Eala. One Toronto supporter who organized a group gathering to watch Eala designed custom white t-shirts with Eala's name and the words "Rise, Believe, Inspire." Alex is putting the Filipino community on the map and giving inspiration to everyone, he told reporters. The roar that had shaken Toronto was unlike anything the Canadian Open had ever experienced. Diane Castillejo, a traveling Filipino journalist, described it as a super wild Filipino crowd. The loudest I have ever heard. It felt like it was in the Philippines. Incredible. Mark Pecci, the play-by-play commentator, added, "It's the kind of noise that accompanies a Grand Slam win, and this is just the second round here in Toronto." And when Eala finally walked off center court, she understood exactly what the empty stands meant. The fans who had filled Sobeys Stadium weren't just there for the victories, they were there for her. And even in defeat, they had given her something she would carry with her forever. "I'm super grateful for the experiences that I've had here in Toronto. It's been an amazing debut. I'll carry these memories with me for a really long time," Eala said in her post-match press conference. The empty stands weren't the end of Eala-mania. They were proof that it had happened. And for a 21-year-old from the Philippines who had left home at 13 to chase a dream that seemed impossible, that was more than enough. The match was over, the final point had been won, and Belinda Bencic had just done what no one else had managed in over a week. She had beaten Alex Eala. The Swiss star had dominated from start to finish, sealing a 6-4, 6-0 victory in just 73 minutes. But what happened next would leave the tennis world stunned. Instead of celebrating her victory with the usual post-match routine, Bencic did something unexpected. She took a moment to address the Filipino crowd that had packed Sobeys Stadium. "I know most of you guys were cheering for Alex, but I still have to say it was very nice to play in front of you all," Bencic said during her on-court interview, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Thank you so much for the great crowd tonight." The crowd responded with applause. The same fans who had been chanting Eala's name moments earlier were now cheering for the woman who had just ended their hero's run. It was a moment of sportsmanship that captured the spirit of the Eala effect. Bencic wasn't finished. She continued, her voice carrying genuine appreciation. "And thank you to those who were cheering for me as well. It was super nice to play here tonight." The Swiss star had just revealed something that would leave the WTA in total shock. She hadn't been intimidated by the roaring Filipino crowd. She had embraced it. "You know, I never really minded that," Bencic explained in her post-match press conference. "Because whenever I played Serena a couple years ago, and also in Fed Cups played against France and Brazil, I really like it. I embrace it. I definitely prefer this over a crowd that's not really interested or a little bit quiet." The comparison to Serena Williams sent a jolt through the tennis world. Bencic, a former world No. 4 and Olympic gold medalist, had just compared the atmosphere of playing Alex Eala to playing the greatest player in history. She had seen the Filipino fans as a challenge to be welcomed, not a distraction to be avoided. "Obviously I know they were cheering for her, which was super nice, and the atmosphere was great," Bencic added. "So I kind of just tried to focus on myself and also embrace it like for myself." I was mentally prepared, but it's not something that bothers me so much. But the most revealing part of Bencic's comments came when she was asked about the match itself. The Swiss star had just ended Eala's 7-match winning streak, and she did it by making history of her own. It was her 10th consecutive win over a left-handed player, a statistic that even surprised her. I feel like it can't be coincidental, Bencic admitted. It's weird for me as well because I really hate playing lefties and it's just not comfortable. But maybe I feel like because I have good timing, I'm kind of able to switch. The Swiss star, who had won the Canadian Open before in 2015, had proven that she was not just a former champion. She was a player who could handle any challenge thrown at her. A roaring crowd? A red-hot young opponent? A nation of millions watching? It didn't matter. Bencic had solved the Eala puzzle, and in doing so, she had delivered a masterclass in how to embrace the Eala effect. Not by fighting it, not by complaining about it, but by welcoming it as part of the sport she loved. As the Filipino fans filed out of Sobeys Stadium, they did so with a new appreciation for the woman who had beaten their hero. Belinda Bencic had not just won a tennis match. She had won their respect, and that perhaps was the most stunning twist of all. The match was over. The 6-4 6-0 scoreline was a harsh reminder that even the most incredible runs must eventually come to an end. Belinda Bencic had been clinical, solving the Eala puzzle with precision and experience. The Filipino crowd at Sobeys Stadium, which had roared for 5 straight days, had fallen silent. The fans who had packed every seat began to file out, their flags folded, their chants fading into the Toronto night. But when Alex Eala finally faced the press, she didn't sound like someone who had just been defeated. She sounded like someone who understood that her journey was just beginning. It's always tough, of course, after a loss, Eala admitted, her voice carrying the weight of exhaustion and disappointment. But I'm looking back at these past maybe 2 weeks as a really big positive. I think I've played really well. I've gotten through so many obstacles. The numbers told the story of a young woman who had pushed herself to the absolute limit. She had played 8 matches in roughly 12 days, winning 7 in hugely impressive fashion. She had won her first WTA Tour title in Washington, D.C., defeating World No. 3 Jessica Pegula in a rain-delayed final. She had flown to Toronto, barely had time to rest, and immediately faced a brutal draw. She had fought through an ankle injury, fatigue, and the weight of a nation's expectations. And yet, here she was, not making excuses, not dwelling on the defeat, but looking ahead with the perspective of a champion. I'm healthy, which is something I'm super grateful for, Eala said, emphasizing that her physical well-being remained her top priority. I'm counting my blessings. I'm taking the lessons that I have had from these 2 weeks and hopefully implementing them even more and in a better way in Cincinnati and New York. The Cincinnati Open was next. The U.S. Open, the final Grand Slam of the season, was waiting at the end of the North American swing, and Eala, who had just climbed to a career-high No. 20 in the world rankings, was determined to keep climbing. But first, she needed a break. A moment to breathe, a moment to be human. Yeah, I definitely will take maybe 2 days off, Eala said with a laugh, lightening the mood. I do have to travel to Cincinnati. I need to get a haircut. I haven't gotten a haircut in a while. My nails are grown out. The joke was a reminder that beneath the pressure, beneath the expectations, beneath the weight of a nation's hopes, Alex Eala was still just a 21-year-old who wanted a haircut and some time with friends. I'll reunite with some friends in Cincinnati and just try to have fun, she added. I'll be back on court like that, snaps fingers, so I got to enjoy what I have. I got to enjoy the time that I have that I'm not on court. She also took a moment to acknowledge the team that had supported her through the grueling 2-week stretch. Coach Joan Bosch, who had been by her side through the highs and lows, received special praise. I think he plays a big part in my development as a player and I trust him a lot, Eala said. I feel like we work great as a team alongside my other 2 coaches from the academy. I think it's really important to have someone who backs you and believes in you, and I feel that from him. But the most heartfelt moment came when Eala addressed the fans who had made her Toronto debut unforgettable. The same fans who had packed Sobeys Stadium, who had waved Philippine flags from every section, who had chanted her name until their voices went hoarse. Maraming salamat mga kababayan sa lahat ng ginawa niyo para sa akin ngayong linggo dito sa Toronto, Eala said, her voice filled with emotion. Palagi kayong sumusuporta, palagi kayong nagdadasal, palagi kayong nagpupuyat kaya tuloy-tuloy akong magtatrabaho. The gratitude was genuine, the connection was real. And as Eala left Toronto, she did so with memories that would last a lifetime. I'm super grateful for the experiences that I've had here in Toronto, she reflected. It's been an amazing debut. I'll carry these memories with me for a really long time. The Eala era had not ended in Toronto, it had only just begun. And as the Filipina sensation boarded her flight to Cincinnati, she carried with her the lessons of the past 2 weeks, the love of a nation, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew that her best was yet to come.